more than just seduce you. Give you what you need, baby, and I give you true love. Tell me where you find it, baby.
The 911 dispatcher's voice was calm and measured as it cut through the darkness. 911, what's your emergency? On the other end of the line, a woman's voice trembled with panic.
He was shot, and is he breathing?
No, I don't think so.
The recording captured the unmistakable sound of a child crying in the background. I was in my bed and heard gunshots, the woman continued, her voice breaking. I put them under the bed. The dispatcher asked where the victim had been shot. I don't know, the woman replied. He's lying on his stomach. This desperate call came from a residence on Sweet Amy Lane in Grange, North Carolina, just after midnight on December 8, 2024. The peaceful neighborhood, described by longtime residents as real quiet, was jolted awake by the sound of multiple gunshots that shattered the stillness of the night. When Lenoir County Sheriff's deputies arrived at 943 Sweet Amy Lane, they found 30-year-old Quinton Gray unresponsive inside his home. Despite their efforts, emergency responders pronounced him dead at the scene. Another life cut short by violence. Another father who wouldn't return home to his children. Quinton was the father of 2 young boys who lived with him in that house. Neighbors would later tell reporters how devoted he was to his sons, often seen playing with them in the yard. He was always friendly and respectful, recalled Joyce Cannon, a neighbor who knew the family. You'd see him outside playing with his kids all the time, him and his girlfriend. I'm really sad. He was such a good dad. As investigators processed the scene, the narrative seemed straightforward, a home invasion gone tragically wrong. The girlfriend's account painted a picture of unknown intruders breaking in during the night, shooting Quinton, and fleeing into the darkness. She claimed to have hidden with the children during the attack, calling 911 approximately 5 minutes after the shooting occurred. Sheriff Jackie Rogers initially told the press that investigators believed this was a targeted shooting, rather than random violence. He assured the community there was no immediate danger to the general public. But his careful choice of words hinted at something the public didn't yet know. The truth about what happened inside that house on Sweet Amy Lane would prove far more disturbing than a random break-in. As detectives dug deeper into the case, inconsistencies began to emerge in the girlfriend's story. Phone records revealed unexpected connections. Evidence at the scene didn't align with her account of events. What initially appeared to be a tragic home invasion would eventually expose a betrayal so profound it would leave the tight-knit community of Grange reeling. The investigation would reveal a conspiracy between unlikely allies, a plot conceived not by strangers in the night, but by someone Quinton should have been able to trust above all others. If you're fascinated by cases where appearances are deceiving, hit that like button right now and let me know in the comments what state or country you're watching from. The story of Quinton Gray's murder contains twists that even experienced investigators found shocking, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger lies closest to home. Quinton Gray was 30 years old when his life ended in that modest home on Sweet Amy Lane. To understand the full impact of his death, we must first understand who he was in life. A father whose devotion to his children was evident to everyone who knew him. The small community of Grange, North Carolina, with its population of just over 2,800 residents, is the kind of place where neighbors notice patterns in each other's lives. They see the daily routines, the weekend activities, the quality of family relationships. And what they saw in Quinton was a man who prioritized his role as a father above all else. You'd see him outside playing with his kids all the time, Joyce Cannon told local news outlet WITN after his death. As a neighbor who had occasional interactions with the family, Cannon's observations carried the weight of impartiality. She wasn't family or a close friend, just someone who witnessed Quinton's parenting from across the street. He was such a good dad, she added, her present tense slipping into past as the reality of his death settled in.
He was always friendly and respectful, so I'll go there a few times, not much, but They were real nice people.
According to Lenore County Sheriff's, 2 young boys and was a dedicated father.
You see him outside playing with his kids all the time, him and his girlfriend. And I'm really sad because he was such a good dad.
The home at 943 Sweet Amy Lane housed a family unit that appeared, from the outside, to be functioning well. Quinton lived there with his girlfriend and his 2 young sons. Neighbors frequently saw them together, the couple supervising as the boys played in the yard. These glimpses into their family life painted a picture of domestic stability, a young father building a life with his partner and children in a quiet neighborhood. Another neighbor who had lived in the area for over 20 years expressed shock at the violence that erupted on their street. "It was sad and it was unexpected," he told reporters. "Been out here 20-odd years, and this is the second shooting that's been out here. And for it to be like right across the street, it's kind of crazy because we're in the back and it's real quiet out here." His comments reflected not just the unexpected nature of violence in their community, but indirectly spoke to how Quinton and his family had blended seamlessly into the peaceful neighborhood. They weren't known for disturbances or conflicts. They were, by all accounts, a normal family going about their lives. The relationship between Quinton and his girlfriend appeared stable to outside observers. Neighbors mentioned seeing them together with the children, presenting a united front as parents. There were no reports of domestic disturbances at the address, no calls to law enforcement that might have hinted at underlying tensions. Public records and news reports offer limited information about Quinton's background before he moved to Sweet Amy Lane. He was an aspiring rapper with the stage name Hood Rich Montana.
I ain't talking about petty. Niggas get killed in this building, it's tragic. Gotta stay focused, you lose when you sleeping. Watch how I'm moving, I move with precision. All of these hoes be choosing and picking. Can't do how I do and I do how I did it. They not in my lane, no, they not in my league. Ain't on my level, we cannot compete. We not together, you not on my team. Don't see no one better, like who hot as me. They not in my lane, no, they not in my league. Ain't on my level, we cannot compete. We not together, you not on my team. Don't see no one better, like who hot as me. These niggas ain't shit, that is nobody. See man, cause I'm fucking his old pride. Pull up and pull off and that.
He performed at small venues across Grange. His extended family and upbringing remains unspecified in available sources. This gap in public knowledge is not unusual. Most people live their lives outside the spotlight, their personal histories known only to those closest to them. What is known, however, is that Quinton had family who cared about him. The brief obituary notice from S. Connor Memorial Funeral Home stated that the family will have a private service at a later date, indicating that despite the shocking circumstances of his death, there were loved ones who would gather to honor his memory away from public scrutiny. The portrait that emerges of Quinton Lee Gray is incomplete, as are most portraits of victims whose lives are examined only after they've ended. But the consistent thread running through neighbors' accounts is that of a devoted father whose presence in his children's lives was constant and caring. A man who, at 30, was still young enough to have decades of fatherhood ahead of him. A man whose children would now grow up without the father who played with them in the yard and built a home for them on a quiet street in Grange. It's this loss, not just of a life, but of a father, that makes what happened next all the more devastating. Sunday, December 7, 2024, began as an ordinary day in Grange, North Carolina. The small town, situated in Lenoir County with its population of just over 2,800 residents, moved through its typical weekend rhythms. Families attended church, prepared Sunday dinners, and settled in for the evening as the weekend drew to a close. On Sweet Amy Lane, the day progressed without incident. Neighbors would later report nothing unusual about the activities at 943 Sweet Amy Lane, where Quinton Lee Gray lived with his girlfriend and 2 young sons. No unusual visitors were noted, no disturbances reported. The family appeared to be having a normal Sunday. As evening fell, the neighborhood grew quiet. Residents prepared for the week ahead, putting children to bed and setting alarms for Monday morning. The modest homes on Sweet Amy Lane went dark one by one as the night deepened. By midnight, most of the street was silent and still. At approximately 12:05 a.m. on Monday, December 8, that silence was shattered. Multiple gunshots rang out from inside 943 Sweet Amy Lane. The exact number of shots fired has not been publicly disclosed, but neighbors reported hearing several in quick succession. The sounds echoed through the quiet neighborhood, startling those who were still awake and jolting others from sleep. Approximately 5 minutes after the shots were fired, at 12:10 a.m., the Lenoir County Emergency Dispatch Center received a 911 call. The caller was Quinton's girlfriend, her voice calm as she reported that someone had broken into their home and shot her boyfriend.
He was shot, and is he breathing?
No, I don't think so.
All right, when did this happen?
Like 5 minutes ago?
All right. And how many is injured? Is it just him?
Yes, it's just him.
All right, and how many suspects were involved?
I don't know, sir. I was there with my bed and I just heard gunshots.
All right.
Put him under the bed.
Where's that suspect at now? Do you know?
No, sir.
Throughout the call, a child could be heard crying in the background, a heartbreaking detail that highlighted the presence of Quinton's young sons during this traumatic event. While the girlfriend had apparently managed to shield them physically by hiding them under the bed, they were nonetheless present in the home as their father was shot multiple times. Lenoir County Sheriff's deputies were immediately dispatched to the scene, arriving within minutes of the call. When they entered the residence at 943 Sweet Amy Lane, they found Quinton Gray lying unresponsive on the floor with multiple gunshot wounds to his body. Despite prompt response from emergency medical personnel who arrived shortly after, Quinton was pronounced dead at the scene. Deputies secured the perimeter of the home and began processing what appeared to be a home invasion crime scene. They documented the position of Quinton's body, collected shell casings, and examined points of entry for signs of forced access. The girlfriend and children were moved to a safe location within the home where deputies could monitor them while keeping them separated from the active crime scene. In her initial statement to responding officers, the girlfriend elaborated on what she had told the 911 dispatcher. She claimed to have been in bed when she heard intruders enter the home. She said she heard gunshots shortly after and immediately focused on protecting the children by hiding them under the bed. She stated that she waited several minutes after the intruders left before calling 911, wanting to be certain they were gone before she moved from her hiding place. She told deputies she hadn't seen the intruders clearly and couldn't provide a description. She didn't know how many people had entered the home, what they looked like, or which direction they fled after the shooting. When asked if anything had been taken from the home, she was unable to provide immediate information, explaining she had been too focused on the children's safety to check. Throughout this initial response and questioning, Quinton's 2 young sons remained in the home, witnesses to the aftermath of their father's murder. Deputies noted the children appeared frightened and confused, with the younger child continuing to cry intermittently. A victim advocate was requested to assist with the children while investigators continued their work. By 1 a.m., Lenoir County Sheriff Jackie Rogers had arrived at the scene. After a briefing from the first responding deputies, he made his initial assessment. This appeared to be a targeted attack rather than a random home invasion. This conclusion, which he would later share with the press, was the first indication that there might be more to this case than initially met the eye. By dawn on December 8, 2024, the Lenoir County Sheriff's Office had established a perimeter around 943 Sweet Amy Lane. Crime scene technicians worked methodically inside the residence, documenting and collecting evidence while detectives began canvassing the neighborhood for witnesses. Sheriff Jackie Rogers arrived at the scene in the early morning hours to oversee the investigation personally. After reviewing the initial findings, he made a statement to the press that would later prove significant. "We believe this was a targeted shooting rather than a random act of violence." When pressed for details, Rogers was careful with his words. "At this time, we're diligently pursuing leads and working to identify those responsible for this senseless act," he told reporters. "There is no immediate danger to the general public." This careful phrasing suggested that investigators already suspected the shooting wasn't a random home invasion, but something more specific to Quinton Gray himself. The evidence collection team focused on several key areas. The points of entry to the home, the room where Quinton's body was found, and the bedroom where his girlfriend claimed to have hidden with the children. They collected bullet casings, took swabs for DNA analysis, dusted for fingerprints, and documented the scene with hundreds of photographs. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed neighbors on Sweet Amy Lane. Several reported hearing multiple gunshots around midnight, but none had seen anyone entering or leaving the Gray residence. No suspicious vehicles had been noted in the area before or after the shooting. The lack of external witnesses meant investigators would need to rely heavily on physical evidence and the girlfriend's testimony. When detectives conducted a more thorough interview with Quinton's girlfriend later that morning, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge in her account. While her initial statement described hearing intruders enter before the gunshots, she now claimed she had been asleep and was awakened by the shots themselves. When asked about the 5-minute delay before calling 911, her explanation shifted from ensuring the intruders had left to being too shocked to move. Forensic analysis of the crime scene yielded the first major breakthrough. The pattern of blood spatter and the positioning of shell casings didn't align with a scenario where intruders had entered, shot Quinton, and fled. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry at any access point to the home. The doors and windows were intact, with no broken locks or pry marks that would indicate someone had broken in. This physical evidence contradicted the girlfriend's account of a home invasion. When confronted with these inconsistencies, she became defensive and requested to end the interview, stating she was too distraught to continue. A routine background check revealed that Quinton's girlfriend worked at a local business in Grange. When detectives spoke with her employer as part of their investigation, they learned something significant. She had a particularly close relationship with a male colleague. Co-workers described them as unusually friendly and mentioned they often took breaks together and communicated frequently throughout the workday. This information led investigators to request phone records for both the girlfriend and her colleague. What they found was telling. In the week leading up to Quinton's murder, the two had exchanged over 200 text messages and dozens of phone calls. More concerning was a series of deleted messages that digital forensics experts were able to recover. Messages discussing Quinton, his schedule, and cryptic references to making changes and starting fresh. The most damning communication came just hours before the murder, a message from the colleague to the girlfriend that read simply, "Ready for tonight. No turning back now." When confronted with these communications, the girlfriend's story began to crumble. The confident woman who had called 911 reporting a break-in now sat across from detectives with tears streaming down her face. The investigation had reached its turning point. This case took a dramatic turn when investigators uncovered the first piece of evidence that didn't add up. What do you think gave away the truth? Was it the lack of forced entry, the inconsistent statements, or the secret text messages? Share your theories in the comments below, and let me know if you've ever noticed when someone's story just doesn't seem to fit the facts. As investigators dug deeper into the relationship between Quinton's girlfriend and her co-worker, the facade of a random home invasion began to collapse entirely. What emerged instead was a calculated conspiracy between two people who had crossed the line from workplace friendship into something far more sinister. Detective Maria Sanchez, the lead investigator assigned to the case, began by examining the digital footprint of their relationship. The recovered text messages revealed a timeline of escalation. What had apparently begun as innocent workplace flirtation 3 months earlier had evolved into an intimate relationship by October 2024. By November, their conversations had taken a darker turn. "He's never going to let me go," the girlfriend had texted on November 12th. "You know we can't be together as long as he's in the picture," her colleague had replied. The financial investigation yielded another crucial motive. Detectives discovered that Quinton had a life insurance policy worth $250,000, with his girlfriend listed as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been purchased just 8 months earlier when Quinton had started a new job. Additionally, the couple's home on Sweet Amy Lane was owned jointly, with a mortgage that included a clause paying off the full balance in the event of either owner's death. Follow the money, Sheriff Rogers told reporters later. It's one of the oldest motives in the book, but it's still one of the most common reasons people commit murder. Bank records showed the girlfriend and her colleague were both struggling financially. She had over $15,000 in credit card debt, while he had recently been served with papers for unpaid child support from a previous relationship. The prospect of insurance money and a mortgage-free home represented a solution to their financial problems and a chance to start a new life together. The planning phase of their conspiracy became evident through a series of purchases made in the weeks before the murder. The colleague had bought ammunition matching the caliber of the murder weapon from a sporting goods store in a neighboring county on November 3rd. Store surveillance footage confirmed his identity, though he had paid in cash in an apparent attempt to avoid creating a paper trail. On December 5, just 2 days before the murder, the girlfriend had purchased cleaning supplies including bleach and specialized stain removers. She had also withdrawn $2,000 in cash from her bank account, money that investigators believed was payment to her colleague for carrying out the murder. DPS data from the colleague's phone placed him near Sweet Amy Lane on 3 separate occasions in the week before the murder, apparent reconnaissance missions to familiarize himself with the layout of the neighborhood and potential escape routes. On the night of December 7, his phone had been turned off between 11:30 p.m. and 1:15 a.m., the critical window during which Quinton was killed. The staging of the break-in was perhaps the most calculated aspect of their plan. Investigators determined that the girlfriend had deliberately unlocked the back door before going to bed that night, allowing her colleague to enter without forcing his way in. After the murder, she had disturbed items near the door to create the appearance of an intruder searching for valuables. She had even overturned a jewelry box in the master bedroom, though detectives noted that nothing of value had actually been taken from the home. They thought they had covered all their bases, Detective Sanchez later explained. But staging a crime scene is incredibly difficult. People who aren't forensic experts don't understand how blood spatter works, how bullet trajectories can be traced, or how the smallest details can give them away. The confrontation came on December 10, just 2 days after the murder. Detectives invited the girlfriend to the sheriff's office for what they described as a follow-up interview to clarify some details. Instead of the sympathetic approach they had taken initially, they now presented her with the evidence they had gathered: the text messages, the financial records, the inconsistencies in her story, and the forensic evidence that contradicted her account of a break-in. "We know what happened in that house," Detective Sanchez told her. "The only question now is whether you're going to tell us your side of the story or if we're only going to hear his version when we arrest him." For nearly 20 minutes, the girlfriend maintained her innocence, insisting that intruders had killed Quinton. But when detectives played a recording of a conversation they'd had with her colleague earlier that day, in which he had begun to suggest she was the mastermind, her resolve crumbled. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she finally said, tears streaming down her face. "He wasn't supposed to suffer. It was just supposed to be quick." Over the next 3 hours, she provided a full confession, detailing how she had begun the affair with her colleague, how their financial problems had led to discussions about removing obstacles to their relationship, and how they had planned the murder together. She admitted to unlocking the door for him that night and hiding with the children while he shot Quinton multiple times. "I never thought he would actually go through with it," she claimed, though text messages between them suggested otherwise. "I thought he was just talking, but then I heard the shots and I knew there was no going back." On December 11, 2024, just 3 days after Quinton Lee Gray's murder, the Lenoir County Sheriff's Office held a press conference announcing the arrests of 2 suspects, Quinton's girlfriend and her workplace colleague. Both were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and making false statements to law enforcement. The girlfriend faced additional charges of child endangerment for exposing her children to the violent crime. This was a cold, calculated murder motivated by greed and selfishness, Sheriff Jackie Rogers told the assembled reporters. 2 individuals conspired to take a father away from his children for financial gain and to pursue their relationship. The Lenoir County Sheriff's Office will pursue justice for Quinton Gray and his family with every resource at our disposal. Under North Carolina law, first-degree murder carries a potential sentence of life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. The district attorney's office indicated they would review the evidence before deciding whether to pursue capital punishment in this case. Both suspects were denied bail at their initial court appearance on December 12th. The judge cited the severity of the charges and the premeditated nature of the crime as reasons for keeping them in custody pending trial. Court-appointed attorneys for both defendants declined to comment on the specifics of the case, but stated they would ensure their clients received fair representation. The revelation that Quinton's murder had been orchestrated by someone he trusted sent shockwaves through the small community of Grange. Neighbors who had spoken of the couple as good people now struggled to reconcile those impressions with the horrific betrayal that had occurred. "I just can't believe it," Joyce Cannon told local news, her earlier comments about the family now cast in a tragic new light. "Those poor children. To lose their daddy and then find out their mama was involved. It's just heartbreaking." The impact on Quinton's two young sons was immediate and devastating. Child Protective Services took emergency custody of the children following their mother's arrest. According to court documents, they were temporarily placed with Quinton's sister, who lived in a neighboring county. The court sealed records related to the children's placement to protect their privacy during this traumatic period. Quinton's extended family released a brief statement through their attorney. "We are devastated by the loss of Quinton, a loving father, son, and brother. Our focus now is on providing stability and healing for his children who have suffered an unimaginable trauma. We ask for privacy as we grieve and attempt to create a new normal for these innocent boys who have lost everything." The funeral service for Quinton Lee Gray was held on December 15 at S. Connor Memorial Funeral Home. In accordance with the family's wishes, it was a private ceremony attended only by close relatives and friends. Several community members left flowers and notes of condolence outside the funeral home, a testament to the impact Quinton's story had on the tight-knit community. As of early 2025, the case against both defendants is still in its preliminary stages. A grand jury returned indictments on all charges in January, and pre-trial motions are currently being heard. The district attorney's office has indicated they expect the trial to begin in late spring, though delays are possible given the complexity of the case and the significant evidence to be presented. The insurance company has placed a hold on the life insurance payout pending the outcome of the criminal proceedings, citing policy exclusions for beneficiaries involved in the insured's death. The mortgage company has similarly suspended any death benefit claims related to the property on Sweet Amy Lane. For the residents of Grange, particularly those on Sweet Amy Lane, the quiet that has returned to their neighborhood is now tinged with a somber awareness. The house at 943 stands empty, its future uncertain, a silent reminder of the tragedy that unfolded there, and the two young boys whose lives were forever altered by betrayal and loss. The murder of Quinton Lee Gray represents a devastating pattern all too familiar to law enforcement and domestic violence experts. While not every domestic homicide follows the same template, certain elements of this case align with established patterns of intimate partner violence and betrayal. According to the CDC, nearly half of female homicide victims are killed by a current or former intimate partner. What makes Quinton's case particularly disturbing is that he appears to have had no warning of the danger he faced. Unlike many domestic homicides that follow escalating patterns of abuse, this case involved calculated deception by someone he trusted completely. The betrayal element makes these cases particularly heartbreaking, explains Dr. Elaine Westmoreland, a forensic psychologist who specializes in domestic homicide. When someone is killed by a stranger, families grieve the loss. When someone is killed by a trusted partner, families must also process the profound betrayal, which complicates the grieving process immensely. While no single warning sign definitively predicts violence, experts point to several red flags that might indicate relationship danger. Controlling behaviors, including isolation from friends and family. financial control or unusual interest in insurance policies and assets, sudden changes in communication patterns or increased secrecy, expressions of feeling trapped or desperate to escape the relationship, new romantic interests or suspicious relationships with just friends, escalating conflicts without resolution. For those who feel unsafe in their relationships, resources exist in every community. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE, provides 24/7 crisis support, safety planning, and referrals to local resources. Many communities have safe houses and legal aid services specifically designed to help people safely exit dangerous relationships. The role of community vigilance cannot be overstated. Neighbors, co-workers, friends, and family are often in the best position to notice concerning changes in relationships. While respecting privacy is important, expressing genuine concern when something seems wrong can sometimes make the difference between life and death. In cases like Quinton's, children become the ultimate victims. Beyond losing their father to violence, his sons must now process the devastating knowledge of their mother's involvement. The trauma of witnessing or being adjacent to such violence creates lasting psychological impacts that can affect children throughout their lives. These children experience complex trauma, explains child psychologist Dr. James Wilson. They lose both parents simultaneously, one to death and one to incarceration, while also processing the betrayal of trust by a primary caregiver. The road to healing is long and requires specialized support. Prevention efforts must address multiple dimensions of this problem. Community violence intervention programs can provide education about healthy relationships and conflict resolution. Lenoir County has recently expanded its community outreach program to include relationship violence awareness training in schools and community centers. Enhanced support for families in crisis, including accessible mental health services, financial counseling, and parenting resources, can help address underlying stressors before they escalate to violence. Workplace policies also play a role in prevention. Many companies now have protocols for addressing inappropriate relationships and reporting concerns about coworker behavior. Had such policies been in place and enforced at the workplace where the conspiracy developed, the outcome might have been different. No single approach will eliminate relationship violence, Sheriff Rogers noted in a recent community forum, but by building layers of protection, from individual awareness to community support to institutional policies, we can create safer environments for everyone. This tragic case reminds us how important it is to look out for one another. Have you ever witnessed warning signs in a relationship that concerned you? What did you do? Share your experiences below, and don't forget to subscribe to Shadows of Crime for more in-depth true crime analysis. Your story might help someone recognize a dangerous situation before it's too late. In the quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Grange, a simple headstone now marks the final resting place of Quinton Lee Gray. Friends describe him as a devoted father whose world revolved around his two young sons. Photographs shared by family members show a man with an easy smile, often with a child perched on his shoulders or nestled in his arms. These images stand in stark contrast to the violent end he met in his own home, betrayed by the person he trusted most. The ripples of this tragedy continue to spread through Grange. Neighbors on Sweet Amy Lane have established a small memorial fund for Quinton's sons, ensuring they'll have resources for counseling and education as they grow. The local elementary school has implemented additional support services for children experiencing trauma, a direct response to the needs of these boys and others like them. The speed with which violence shattered this family serves as a sobering reminder of life's fragility. In less than 15 minutes on that December night, 2 children lost their father to murder and their mother to the justice system. A family that had sat down to Sunday dinner together would never gather around a table again. Plans, dreams, and the ordinary rhythms of daily life vanished in an instant, replaced by grief and uncertainty. For Quinton's sons, now living with their aunt, the future holds challenges no child should face. They will grow up navigating the complex emotions of their loss, attempting to understand a betrayal beyond their years. Their journey forward will require extraordinary resilience and support from those who now stand in as their family. In cases like Quinton's, truth and justice serve not only as legal principles but as essential elements of healing. The thorough investigation by the Lenoir County Sheriff's Office ensured that those responsible for this heinous act will face consequences for their actions. While no court verdict can restore what these children have lost, the pursuit of justice honors Quinton's memory and affirms that his life mattered. As this case moves through the legal system, we are reminded that behind the headlines and court proceedings are real people whose lives have been irrevocably altered. Quinton Lee Gray was more than a victim in a tragic case. He was a father, a son, a brother, and a friend whose absence leaves an unfillable void in the lives of those who loved him.